Dear friends, I welcome you all to the second session on John Donne's poetry. Yesterday, we talked about John Donne's background as a poet, and then we discussed the poem The Sun Rising. Today, we would discuss the another significant love poem written by John Donne, and the title of the poem is The Canonization. As I said to you earlier, also, if we minutely make an observation of John Donne's love poetry, we will find that John Donne has expressed three types of love through his poems. Number one, cynical love, and the cynical love is expressed in the poem like Go and Catch a Falling Star and the other poems. Conjugal love, when he's talking about the love that exists between the lover and the beloved, or the love of the wedded life. This love is being expressed in several other poems. And then the third notion of love that he expresses is the Platonic love. And the present poem is an example of the Platonic love. Platonic love is neither spiritual nor physical. It is not physical because there is no sex attraction involved in the exhibition of love. When we talk about spiritual love is supposed to be the love of two souls. And when we talk about the soul, we exclude the body, the love that exists between the soul or between the soul and the Almighty, and so on and so forth. In the case of Platonic love, the poet does have a deep affection for the object of attraction, but then this is not romantic love or the sexual love. And this is how it is different from either spiritual love or romantic love. The poem The Canonization is a typical example of the Platonic love. Platonic love, as the name suggests, was introduced, this concept came into being when Plato discussed this notion in a dialogue entitled Symposium. In Symposium, he talked about the various features of the love, the Platonic love, and discussing the features of the Platonic love, he said, it is neither sexual love nor it is spiritual love, the love that exists between a soul and the Almighty or between two souls minus body. Now, the same sort of love has been expressed in the poem The Canonization also. As I said to you, John Donne's poetry is remarkable for dramaticality, the dramatic element which are present in the poems of John Donne. Now, when I have a look at when I read the poem like The Sun Rising and The Canonization, I individually feel that this is intellectualism that dominates the poems of or the poetry of John Donne. And the same thing is true about the poem The Canonization also. Now, when we talk about the meaning of the title, The canonization, I do not know whether you are aware or not. It is a process of making a saint according to the laws of the church. जब चर्च के नियमों के अनुसार किसी को सेंट बनाया जाता है, that process is given the name the canonization. And the poet says that they are the saints, but then they are not the love saints. And it explains the paradox that is there in the poem. The paradox, Cleaneth Brooks and others have said that there is a paradox that underlies the poem, but then there are critics. And who are the critics? Like, they have they have come out with the opinion that the love expressed in the poem is positive because the poet has got something positive to say about about the concept of love. Now, joining the poem with John Donne's personal life, it is being said that this poem was written for Anne Moore, whom John Donne quoted, and ultimately, as you must be aware, that she became the cause of his ruin as well. Now, after having talked about all this, so the very paradox that lies in the title is that the title is religious. It refers to the process of making sense according to according to the rule of or the laws of church. But the poet is talking about the profane love, the worldly love, the physical love. Now, the physical love, how can one become a saint out of physical love? That we need to comprehend, that we need to understand. And therefore, this paradox, right from the beginning till the end, this paradox underlies the whole idea. Now, the poem, as I said to you, is also significant for dramatic element. There are as many as three characters. One is the active character who speaks, and the other two are the passive characters. Perhaps one is the friend of the poet or the listener, and the other one is the person whom the poet loves. So, what you need to keep in mind is that this poem is basically a dramatic monologue. And when we talk about the dramatic monologue, in dramatic monologue, you must have read Robert Browning's poetry. In dramatic monologue, there is only one active speaker, and the others are the passive listeners. And the same thing is true about this poem also. There is one active speaker, he speaks, he tells the friend, he talks about the beloved, talks about himself, and the other two, they are the passive listeners, they are there in the background of the poem. So the poem is very significant for dramatic element, and if you can equal, of course it cannot be equal, but you would say, you can say that this the mode in which the expression has taken place is close to the mode of dramatic expression that is called a dramatic monologue. Now let me begin the poem. The canonization, as I said to you, it refers to the process of making saint according to the laws of church. And therefore there lies a paradox that how canonization can be related to the profane lover, can be related to the physical lovers, can be related to the worldly lovers, one male and the other one perhaps the female. Look at the dramatic opening of the poem. How does the poem begin? For God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love, or chide my palsy, or my gout, my five grey hair, or ruined fortune flout. with wealth, your state, your mind with arts improve, take you a course, get you a place, observe his humor, or his grace, or the king's real, or his stamped face, contemplate what you will approve, so you will let me love. For God's sake, hold your tongue. Perhaps, as I said to you, there is a person in the background, and this person may be one of the friends of the poet. The poet, addressing the friend, says that don't say anything. For God's sake, hold your tongue. Don't speak anything. Don't obstruct. Don't interfere in my love. Don't interfere. Don't be an indulgence. Don't be an interference. Don't be an obstruction in my love. He says that you can scold me for my paralysis. You can scold me for my gout. Gout, in Hindi we call it gathia ka dard, inflammation of smaller joints. This is called gout. The poet says that you can scold me for my paralysis, you can scold me for my gout, my 5 gray hairs, or ruined fortune flout. You can mock at me for my old age. 5 gray hairs means I have grown only a few hair. They have also become grown. They have also grown gray, and thereby the poet is trying to say that I have become old enough, and therefore he says, you can scold me for my old age, you can scold me for my ruined fortune. Flout means mock. You can make fun of me for my ruined fortune. With wealth, your state, your mind with arts improve. But then he says, but then stop grudging. Stop grudging. Grudging, Grudging. He says, stop grudging and let me love. Let me repeat what the poet has said. The poet says that don't obstruct, stop grudging, let me love. He says, you can scold me for my old age, you can scold me for my paralysis, you can scold me for my gout, that is inflammation of smaller joints. You can rebuke me for my ruined fortune, but allow me to love. Take you a course, get you a place, observe his honor or his grace, or the king's real or his stamped face. He says, you can consider my love a weakness or infirmity. You can consider it as a disease, but confine yourself, confine yourself to my infirmities like paralysis and old age. But don't disturb in my love making. And then he says, why don't you pay attention to your own welfare? It will be better for you to go and keep yourself busy with politics or money making or obtain a position. Which position? Position of significance, by becoming either a lord or a bishop. Bishop, because thereby you will be able to enjoy or command the respect of the people. Or you can go and win royal flavor, and in fact not the flavor but the favor. You can go and win royal favor, you can make efforts for that. And what you can do, you can cultivate the court manners and gaze at the king's face. Or if you prefer, he says, get into business and look at the face of the king stamped on the coins. Now you look at the tasks that the poet is giving to the friend, but he says there are a number of things These things will bring you name and fame, but then don't create obstruction, don't interfere, let me love. And then he says, or if you wish, this is what he says ahead, or the king's real or his stamped faced contemplate what you will approve, so you will let me love. Or what he says, he goes further and he says that if you wish, you can do a course in philosophy or mathematics or whatever if it might be, or you can engage yourself in cultivating arts. Now, earlier he gave him the things which will bring him honor, the worldly honor, and then now he is suggesting certain things related to the skills, and then he says if he keeps himself busy in cultivating these skills, in the long run, these skills will also bring him honor. And what are those skills? He says that you can take a course in philosophy or mathematics, or you may engage yourself in cultivating arts, or you may choose any of the activities that you like. But then he says, please allow me to love. Please allow me to love. Don't interfere in my love. I will not allow you to create obstruction in the process of love. Now, this is what, look at the dramatic. Now, earlier he says, don't interfere. And then he says, why you should not interfere? He says that you can consider it my stupidity, but then don't scold me for this. You can scold me for several things. You can scold me for old age. You can scold me for my disease. You can scold me for my ruined fortune. And then he suggests him that why don't you go and do some course that will bring him honor, means cultivate some skill. And in the skill, if you are a skilled person, then these skills will bring you honor. Or he says, why don't you go and try to win royal favor or do certain things which will bring you honor. But then he says, let me love. It's like a command, let me love. It's like a command, imperative command, and he says, let me love. As if there is something that the poet will not like to leave, even if the friend persists on it. Now, the second stanza. Alas, alas, who is injured by my love? What merchant ships have my seas drowned? Have my sighs drowned? Sighs. Who shares my tears have overflowed his ground? When did my courts a forward spring remove? When did the heats which my veins fill add one man to the plague bill? Soldiers find votes and lawyers find out still litigious man, which quarrels move, though see and I do love. Alas, alas, who is injured by my love? And then the poet says, I am so sorry to tell you that people object to my love, but then my love has done no harm to anyone. My love has not done any injury to anyone. My love has done no harm to anyone. Alas, alas, who is injured by my love? What merchant ship have my sighs drowned? He says that even the ships of the merchant, they continue to come and go. In other words, he says that no ship of a merchant will sink due to my sighs. They will continue to come and go. Then the another thing that he says, my sighs, my tears have overflowed his ground. Then he says, my tears of love will not bring any flood nor any damage to the farmers. My tears of love, that is the love of that is the tears of love will not bring any flood that will cause damage to the farmers. nor will it bring any cold, and if it brings cold, then the spring season will be removed. And he says, I tell you that my love will not remove cold and the bring the spring season. So you can be rest assured, he says. And then he comes to the third point. Number one, he said, the merchant, the ships will not stop coming and going. Then number two, he says that my love will not bring flood, which will be causing damage or harm to the farmers. Neither will it bring cold, which will be replacing the spring season. But then what he says, then he goes further and says, when did the heats which my veins fill add one man to the plague bill? And then the poet says that the heat of my woes promises, which one makes during the course of love, the heat of my woes caused by my love will not interfere either in the activities of the soldiers or in the activities of the lawyers. He says that the heat of my woes, my promises, will not interfere either with the activities of the soldiers or with the activities of the lawyers, because it is they two who take maximum oaths. And therefore he concludes what he concludes: soldiers find war and lawyers find out a still litigious man which quarrels move. And therefore he says that my love. Now, litigious man means lawyers, and therefore he concludes that my love will not be causing any harm to anyone, and the life will continue to go on as usual, and man would become prosperous. Man would prosper day after the other, means my love will not be doing any harm to anyone. And this is how he is trying to convince the friend, he is trying to dissuade the friend not to come to him. He says that don't come to me and let me love. Then I come to the third stanza. So look at the dramaticality of the poem. In the background is the friend to whom the poem has been addressed, and he continuously says that don't interfere because I'm not going to abide by your interference. And then he tries to convince him in an argumentative way, and this argumentation is so convincing that you succeed in getting the things done. Call us what you will, we are made such by love. We are made such by love. Call her one, me another fly. We are tapers too, and at our own cost die. Now look at the beautiful comparison that the poet is making, that the poet makes. What he says, first, call her one, me another fly. Flies, makki. We are tapers too, tapers, patange, which are born when there is rain. We are tapers too, and at our own coast die, and we in us find the eagle and the dove. Eagle means the most cruel being, cheel, most cruel being, and dove, the most innocent being, kabutar. The phoenix riddle hath more wit. Phoenix is the name of a bird. It is being said that the phoenix, it will rise like a phoenix. This is what we often say. Phoenix, it is being said that on the ashes of one phoenix, then another phoenix arises. So that comparison is also here. The phoenix riddle hath more wit. Wit means sense. By us, we two being one are it. So to one neutral thing, both sexes fit, we die. and rise the same and prove. Die means experience the consummation of love. Die here means experience the consummation of love. Experience the consummation of love. Love का उपभोग and rise the same and prove mysterious by this love. Now the poet is making another argument, is putting forward another argument why he should be allowed to continue to love. And the poet says, you may call us anything, but one thing is final. And what is that one thing? That one thing is that we are imbued with the spirit of love. And then he says, you can call us flies. Because why flies? Look at the beautiful comparison that the intellectualism, he says you can call us flies because we keep, what do? We keep hovering around, we keep wheeling round each other, wheeling round circle mein, that is the lover is wheeling round the beloved and the beloved is wheeling round the lover. So he says that we wheel round each other, or the poet says that you can call us tapers also because we kill ourselves by burning. This is how the tapers die. The tapers die. How the tapers die? They die by burning themselves. And in that sense, they are like two tapers. The poet says, each of us is a taper and as well as a fly also. Fly because we wheel round each other, number one, that is why we fly. And we are taper because we die on our own coast. For the tapers. And then he goes ahead and he says, we may be compared to the eagle and the dove also because we find in each other the most tyrannical, as I said, eagle, the most cruel, the most tyrannical, and the innocent and the gentlest of beings. Eagle is a symbol of tyranny or cruelty, and dove is the symbol of innocence or what does gentleness, gentlemanliness or humility. And then the poet goes to prove his case by the riddle of the phoenix, and he says the riddle of the phoenix makes more sense as far as the case of us two are related. The case of us two is related. The case of the lover and the beloved, he says it is the phoenix riddle that makes more sense. He says we being, although physically we are two, but then basically we are one. And therefore, for we two being one, because she belongs to me and I belong to her. So basically we being one, what are we? We are like the phoenix. We are like the phoenix. So if one die, then on the basis of means on the ashes of that person, the another phoenix will arise, and this is how the love will continue to grow. And that is why I said it is neither conjugal love nor cynical love, it is platonic love that the poet has expressed in the poem. The poet goes on saying that our sexes fit together so perfectly to form a being of no sex. That is why platonic, not sexual. that after we die, we shall come to life again. Basically, we are of one sex. We are not of two sexes. And therefore, if we die, because if they die, only one being will die. Because the poet says that basically they are one. And after death, they will come to life again. And they will be the same being as they were before. And just as the identical phoenix rises from its own ashes, the lovers will also rise from their ashes. Look at the far fetched comparison. The intellectual uh, input that has been supplied by the poet uh, in making the content develop, and then he concludes the stanza, and then he says, this love will constitute a mystery of reverence. Means this is the love because it is neither physical love, nor sexual love, nor conjugal love. It is platonic love, and therefore it will command reverence of the people. And therefore, allow me to love. And therefore, allow me to love. Now, let us go to the next stanza, and that is stanza number 4. In stanza number 4, we can die by it, if not live by love. Die, as I said to you, experience the consummation of love. This is what die means. If not live by love, and if unfit for tombs or hears, tombs, TOMBS, or hears means carrying a coffin, carrying a coffin at the funeral. That is hears, carrying a coffin at the funeral. Our legend be, it will be fit for verse, and if no piece of chronicle we prove, piece of chronicle means history. We will build in sonnets poetry rooms as well. A well wrote urn becomes, urn means here love lyric. The greatest ashes as half acre tombs, and by these hymns all shall approve. Approve means be allowed or permitted as canonized for love. And thereby the poet concludes that we will become the love saints. Why love saints? For our love can outblast consummation, power, and love. We are love saints because we have crossed the boundaries or outblast the consummation of love and power. And that is why we are the love saints. Look at how does he conclude the stanza and reach a conclusion justifying the title canonization. The poet says, and I go back to the first line, we can die by it. The poet says that if we cannot live by love, we can at least die by it. And then he says, we can afford to trade life. We can afford to trade life, for death is the consummation of the act of love. Death is the consummation of the act of love. We may not be legendary figures, this is what he says. We may not be legendary figures, and thereby we may not be worthy of tombs and memorials, means our love and we being the participants into this process of love making, we may not be worthy of tombs and memorials, but he says we certainly deserve a place in poetry. We will be worthy of poetry. The poets will be writing about us. Sonnets and songs will be written in praise of our love. He says the historians may not be interested in us, and they may not write chronicles about us, but then I am very sure that sonnets and songs will be written on us and about our love. Then he goes on to explain, he says that our ashes and we, like a well wrought urn, will suit the greatest ashes. Means our our if we are to be put, we are to be put into the urn. And what that urn would be, that would be a sort of land where our ashes can be put. And then there would be hymns that would be composed in appreciation of us. And by these hymns, he says, we shall be confined, we shall be confirmed, we shall be respected by the world. How shall we be respected by the world? As canonized saints. The world will recognize us as canonized saints, that I tell you, because they will say that their love was not physical, that their love was not sexual, their love was not spiritual either, but then what their love was, and therefore it may not be legendary. It may not deserve a place in big tombs and memorials, but certainly it deserves a place in poetry, and therefore they would be writing sonnets and song about us, means about the lovers and the love, and thereby the poet and the beloved will be elevated to the level of love saints or saints of love. And then the poet concludes and he says that I tell you now that our love is not mundane. I have not said it so far. But love, our love is not mundane, it is not profane, it is not worldly, it is not physical, it is not lustful either. And he says, we have given up the lust. We have given up the lust for each other. We have given up the lust for wealth. We have given up the lust for power. Now, this is how he justifies that the love that he expresses in the poem The Canonization is, is the Platonic love. And therefore, the paradox has been resolved. The paradox has been resolved. If you remember William Wordsworth's poem, My Heart Leaps Up, and what he says, child is the father of man. Paradox. How can a child be the father of man and yet the child is the father of man? Means it is the vices and the virtues which are shown into a child during the childhood that makes him either a good man or a bad man. The same thing, the poem started with a paradox and it has reached the resolution of that apparent contradiction now. He says that we can be recognized as canonized saints or canonized lovers. Why canonized lovers? Because we have given up the lust for each other, we have given up the lust for power, and we have given up the lust for wealth. And then he says that we are the love saints because our love can outlast its consummation, and we are a minor miracle. Why miracle? Because we are the loved saints. We are not the lover saints, but we are the saints of love. We are not the lover saints, but we are the saints of love. And because this love is platonic, this love is not conjugal, this love is not cynical, and therefore this is not mundane or profane love. Now, after having talked about the fourth stanza, let us come to the fifth stanza, that is the concluding stanza, and this is how it begins. And thus invoke us, you whom reverend love made one another's hermitage, you to whom love was peace, that now is rays. Who did the whole world's soul extract and drove into the glasses of your eyes? So made such mirrors and such spies that they did all to you epitomize. Countries, towns, courts, back from above, a pattern of your love. And pattern means the model. Now the poet concludes that the love that I have expressed will be a sort of model for the generations to come. Now the poet says that when we have been recognized by the world as canonized lovers, people will be making comment about us. And what would be the comment? The comment would be that you have been made respectful, reverent, or you have got the reverence of the people because you were in love with one another. They would say that love was peace for you, and that is why you have got this reverence. They would say that you were self sufficient as far as love is concerned, and therefore you are great. They would also say that as far as since everything in the world is to be found in each of you, and therefore you constitute a world, and therefore you are great and would be commanding the respect of the world. Now, in each other's eyes, because each other constitute the world, what you can find, a person who would come, he will find in each other's eyes towns and countries. Towns and countries, it means that you have gained the world in each other, means each other possesses the world of love. Each other possesses the world of love, and now they would say that that world has become more meaningful. It is not simply the mundane world, but it is the bond of love that binds the people together. He says, I'm not going to talk about the profane love or the mundane love, but I'm talking about the love that binds the people together. That that inspires the people to work for others. This is the humanitarian love, and therefore my love is platonic. And he says that now we do have a more meaningful world because this is a world that is replete with love. And then the people would be asking us what the people will say. The people will say that now, since you are the saints of love, ask God to give a pattern of your love. Pattern means the model of your love so that others may love as you did. He says that now your love, you pray to God that your love may be recognized as a model for the people, as a pattern for the people, so that even the future generations may follow your love, your ideal love, which is not conjugal, which is not cynical, but which is spiritual and platonic. So you see how the paradox resolves at the end. The poem develops on the paradox because even the very title is paradoxical, but then when we reach the end of the poem, this paradox is resolved. So there is a resolution of the paradox. Now, when we take up to summarize the poem, then there are some 3 4 points which you need to remember. Number one, the canonization is a love poem. The poem projects the poet's positive attitude towards love. Number two. Number three, the poem develops on the basis of the underlying paradox. And the underlying paradox is that of the process of making love. The process of making love, but then this paradox is resolved at the end because the poet says that the love that exists between me and the beloved, it is not the profane love, it is not the mundane love, but it is the spiritual love, it is the platonic love that exists between us two. And that is why he tells the friend not to interfere in their love. The next point, the poem is dramatic in character. And I talked about the dramatization means what makes a poem dramatic. The presence, there is a setting. And what is the setting? The scene. What is the scene? For God's sake, hold your tongue. Now, this is how the poem begins. Setting. And in the background is the poet or the lover or the narrator and the beloved and perhaps the friend to whom the poet addresses the poem. And then this is how this is in the form of a dramatic monologue. There is only one active speaker, and the other two persons who are there in the poem, they are simply passive listeners. Although their reactions are not hinted at by the poet, but then everything that those people would be feeling have been brought out by the poet himself. So it is not exactly like dramatic monologue, but then it does have characteristics of monologue. The poem is remarkable for for the use of metaphysical conceit also. Now look at the metaphysical conceit and the metaphysical conceit. We are tapers to and our own course die. Now the poet is making a comparison and he says we are tapers too. How they have become the tapers we are not aware. But then they are the tapers. So, as I said, when we talk about metaphysical conceit, they are the far fetched comparisons, and the poet has beautifully made use of these far fetched comparisons. T.S. Eliot, if you remember this, what I said about metaphysical conceit, he said that they are a metaphysical conceit is a comparison in which heterogeneous ideas are yoked together by violence. And then the poem is argumentative in character. There is intellectual input right from the very beginning till the end, and therefore the poem becomes a little difficult and complex for the commoner to understand. For a common person, it becomes difficult because of the comparisons, because of the intellectualism that has been made use of by the poet in the poem. Now, the poet is talking about uh, means in a way the poem is replete with wit. And when we talk about wit, we talk about intellectualism. And this element of wit is present in the poem to an appreciable extent. Now, this wit, right from the stanza 1, then the second stanza, how these two stanzas have been connected with the remaining stanzas, speaks of the art that the poet commanded. And the interlinking of the first two stanzas with the remaining three stanzas is very beautifully done. Although it seems that from the third stanza, the poet is moving further. He may not be talking about the same idea now, but then when he ends, it is more than explicit that the poet has kept in mind that the cohesiveness, the coherence and the cohesiveness of the poem have been maintained by bringing the same idea into being in the concluding stanza. And again, in the concluding stanza, the poet says, the lover says that we are the canonized lovers. This was the idea with which he began, but at that time it seemed to be contradictory and therefore a paradox. But then it was not a paradox, but then this paradox has culminated into further explanation to prove the points, to prove the poet's point of view. So these are some of the important points about the poem. I would I would end the poem by reading out what Coleridge said after having read this poem. And this is what Coleridge said about this poem, and I quote one of my favorite poems. As late as 10 years ago, I used to seek and find out grand lines and fine stanzas, but my delight has been far greater since it has consisted more in tracing the leading thought throughout the whole. The former is too much like coveting your neighbor's goods. In the latter, you merge yourself in the author, you become he. And he says, you become the author, you become the he. Unquote. Means he says that I have all appreciation for this poem. And with this, I stop it here. But before I stop, I would like to tell you again that keep writing answers of the comprehension questions
Yes,
and
sir.
critical appreciation of every poem which I have taught, and try to understand everything that I
Yes,
have
sir.
spoken. Because you see, whatever I speak carries weight, and most of the questions in the examination will be coming from what I have said to you. Now, I am not simply paraphrasing the poems, I am giving you enough content. If you remember the whole content, then you need not read so many books of criticism on John Donne or Surrey and Bayard or Chaucer, because whatever I speak, that would be enough even from examination point of view. But then keep preparing for whatever I teach you every day. Okay,
Yes, sir.
is that all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.